Hi everybody, it's Ann Quinn, and today we are going to have a little bibliotherapy session. So the bibliotherapist, me, is in. And today we're going to talk about pandemics and plagues because obviously we are in the middle of a huge pandemic and everybody's interested in it. Like what happened in the past? Are there any lessons that we can learn from the past with other plagues? And so we have a really wonderful collection of books that can shed some light on how we handled plagues in the past. Plus, I've always just found it's fascinating. As a child, I was always fascinated with the Bubonic Plague. We learned about it in our history books. And recently on TV, on PBS, they did a great course program, 24 hours, taught by a professor, all about the Bubonic Plague. And believe it or not, I slogged in there that 24 hours. I went through that. Took a couple of days, but it was fascinating. So I love this book. Love is probably too strong of a word. I like this book a lot, The Horror of the Bubonic Plague. It's got a timeline at the very end that talks about the first bubonic plague that hit the world, and it was called the Justinian Plague in 541 CE. And the last really large bubonic plague happened in San Francisco's Chinatown in 1900. I understand that every year there's a few cases that still appear in the United States and worldwide, but they're very, very small cases, and evidently the CDC is able to get on it immediately and stop it from spreading. So this is a good book, a good browsing book if you want to learn more about the bubonic plague. I think probably more people in the history of the world have died from this plague than any other. Another book that I really have enjoyed browsing through is called Outbreak Plagues that Have Changed History. And this is by Bryn Bernard. It's got like a little creepy cover there. And I like this because you just get the history of all these plagues, but it is done in a very digestible way. It's interesting to read. And you only have about 3 or 4 pages on each plague that they discuss. So this is a good browsing book to learn more about how other societies in throughout the last 2,000 years have dealt and treated the plague. I sometimes like to team together when I'm learning about something, a nonfiction and a fiction book. And sometimes by combining these two different formats, you can delve a little more or deeper into a subject. This is The American Plague, the true and terrifying story of the yellow fever epidemic of 1793 that hit Philadelphia. George Washington was there at that time, and most of the wealthiest people of that community totally fled Philadelphia during that terrible summer of 1793. And the population, I believe, was only around 20,000 people at the time, and over 5,000 people died that summer. So it really took a toll on that community. A fiction book that goes along with it, historical fiction, is by Laurie Halse Anderson. She writes a lot of historical fiction. She's one of my favorite authors, and she wrote Fever 1793. So if you combine these together, it really gives you a scientific breakout and look at the plague, and it also makes it into a more personal form where you see how one family, and particularly this young lady, how she survives this plague. So reading this together, I think, was very illuminating, and I like that. Something that I just recently ordered for our library is called Fever Year, The Killer Flu of 1918. And it's written and illustrated by Don Brown, who has won numerous awards for his work. This is a graphic novel, which means it's in comic book format. But don't let that fool you. Graphic novels can be nonfiction, and obviously this is nonfiction. And this reluctant readers sometimes enjoy this more. But I found it thoroughly fascinating. And one of the reasons why I was so interested in this is because my grandfather, who was only 15 years old at the time, came down with the Spanish flu, or the flu of 1918. And I remember the stories that he would tell about how sick he was for weeks and weeks. And his parents banished him to the attic of his house, and they would make onion poultices that he would put on his chest. And they thought at that time, and if you read this book, they talk about these onion poultices or even necklaces of garlic and onions that they would put around the neck or on the chest of a victim. And supposedly it helped him. It certainly helped my grandfather. He was sick for about 6 weeks, but he made it through. So this just came in and I devoured this in about 30 minutes. So this is very interesting reading. And what else do I have? Oh, smallpox. This is a story of Dr. Jenner and the Speckled Monster, which is about smallpox. And this is also talks about the first time a vaccination was used to treat these plagues. So this is a fascinating study. All of these authors and all of these books are very well written and they're interesting. It's not dull, it's not boring. It gives you a glimpse into the past at how they medically treated. Some of them are insane ideas of how to treat these terrible outbreaks. But it gives you a glimpse into the past, and it tells you that this is something that humanity has dealt with since the beginning of time. They're terrible, they can decimate a population, but somehow or another, each civilization manages to get through it and actually coming out stronger when they get to the other side, and how often these pandemics can truly change society. So if you'd like to learn more about pandemics, please come to the library. We can bundle some books together for you and do curbside service, and we can give you some wonderful reading materials that I think that you will find very fascinating, and also might give you a little bit of relief that we will come through this and we will get to the other side. And yes, it's horrific while you're in the midst of it, and it causes problems between people, like just for instance, the whole mask debate. Those that believe in it, those that don't. It turns out that throughout history, there always has been conflict about using masks. And so you'd like to see how history has dealt with it. So if you're interested, call us at the library. We'll bundle these books together and share it with you. Thank you so much.